and welcome to Singapore and to the majestic Marina Bay Street Circuit. We are gearing up for the qualifying session and we're ready to set the grid for tomorrow evening's Singapore Grand Prix. Now, the sun may have set, but it is still hot and humid here. It's 29 degrees air temperature and 76% humidity. My goodness me, those conditions are going to make the next hour incredibly challenging for all of the 20 drivers. And don't forget, this weekend could be a big weekend for Red Bull Racing. They could take the Constructors' Championship. They lead Mercedes by 310 points, but they need to finish 1-2 in tomorrow's Singapore Grand Prix and take the fastest lap, while Mercedes must score 1 point or less. And yet, here we are with Red Bull struggling as we come into the qualifying hour. Max Verstappen describing his car as unacceptable, complaining about the downshifts and the upshifts, and it looks like Ferrari have the advantage. Coming into qualifying, they have led all the practice sessions with Carlos Sainz topping 2 and Charles Leclerc topping the first one. So what does this mean for the next hour? I'm Rosanna Tennant, down in the pit lane and paddock, and up in the commentary box, our lead commentator Harry Benjamin is joined by former W Series driver Alice Powell, and the BBC Sports chief F1 writer Andrew Benson is there too, ready to witness something wonderful under the lights, I'm sure. But who's going to be on pole position, Harry? It's a really confusing situation. We all thought Ferrari weren't going to go well this weekend, and here we are, they've led all 3 practice sessions.
Yeah, well, you asked me that in FP3 as well, and I very much sat on the fence. Because
Get off the fence.
It's just every time we think there's a snag in the Verstappen Red Bull armour, it seems to sort itself out, and come qualifying, is on pole, takes the win of the race. But this weekend just feels a little bit different. As you mentioned, those problems with the rear of that Red Bull, the upshifts and the downshifts, just seem to be lingering on and on and on. And now the practice is done. Next up is qualifying, and I'm going to say Carlos Sainz is in pole position for securing pole come the end of this qualifying session. I think he's riding high off the back of confidence and getting his first podium of the season last night in Monza with a great epic drive, battling with Verstappen and his teammate. And confidence is key, especially around a street circuit, and he's got that in tons right now.
Definitely, and as you say, Max Verstappen struggling, but also his teammate Checo Perez complaining about the rear end. So it's a team-wide issue. Alice Powell, you've raced around this incredible circuit. The drivers have had a couple of hours, 2.5 hours, to perfect anything. Max Verstappen seemingly with quite a lot of work to do. Does he now get in the car and have almost a totally different beast beneath him? Is it that extreme?
Well, going from his radio message that we heard in that final practice session, he was really complaining about the upshifts, and then he said it was bad in the downshifts. They made a slight change, didn't they, before his final run, which he said, yeah, improved slightly. And then on his way into the pits, he said, well, actually, I have no rear grip. And if this was a drift race, then we are likely to win this race, but it's not a drift race. So he doesn't sound particularly happy in his Red Bull. Neither Sergio Perez. Max was 4th in FP3 and Sergio was in 8th place. So they've got some work to do, but this is it now, Rosanna. There's no more work to be done in terms of tweaking the setups here and there. All they can do is try and make improvements in the driving to suit the car, and we've got our first cars queuing up in the pit lane right now.
We certainly do. They're all getting ready to head out onto this amazing track, which of course has been changed. We're talking about Red Bull and Ferrari, but Andrew Benson in FP3, George Russell hauled his Mercedes up into P2, and Lando Norris was there in P3 in an upgraded McLaren. So could those two drivers, or at least those two teams, Mercedes and McLaren, be troubling the front row this evening?
I think it's really hard to predict, Rosanna. It's one of the more open qualifying sessions we've seen for a long time. I think Ferrari are favourites for front row, and if I had to put my money on anybody, I'd have Charles Leclerc. He did a brilliant pole lap round here in 2019, even if Carlos Sainz has looked slightly more comfortable so far this weekend. But Leclerc does tend to pull things out in qualifying that surprise people. But yes, you're right, Russell and Norris both look very competitive. And although the Aston Martins weren't looking that great in final practice this morning, Fernando Alonso was right up there in P2 yesterday. So I think you could even see Aston Martin involved too. So Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin, all competing with Red Bull, I think, potentially for places at the front.
Well, as Alice said, the cars have headed out to the end of the pit lane. Max Verstappen out, both the Ferraris. I've just been watching George Russell getting strapped into his Mercedes. This is a big hour ahead of these drivers because, of course, it's difficult to overtake around this track. So you need to be as high up the grid as possible. And I know we say that every weekend, but here, that really, really does count. Harry, I'm going to hand it over to you in the commentary box. Let's get qualifying underway for the Singapore Grand Prix.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. Yeah, Q1 underway then, 18 minutes on the clock and counting to eliminate the bottom 5 drivers from this session and start to set the grid for Sunday's Grand Prix as the lights illuminate over 1,600 of them lighting this Marina Bay Street Circuit ahead of the 14th race to be held here. And as we mentioned, a slightly altered track layout, 4.9 kilometres, just over 3 miles, 19 turns, 12 to the left and 7 to the right, because they've gotten rid of 4 corners by the Marina Bay area where we used to go back on ourselves and go underneath a grandstand before hurtling towards the quick chicane that then brings you out to the final double left-hander that sees off a lap in Singapore. Now you come out of the right-hander of 14 and there's a slight kink to the left for turn 15 before a 400-metre straight, which now brings you towards that chicane. So a slight change to the layout, which seems to have gone down rather well with the drivers. The reason for the new layout is there's some redevelopment work going on in that area of the track, but lots of calls from the drivers after free practice to have that as a permanent stay. Will it improve? Will it see more overtaking? We wait to see. But in qualifying now, it is all about the fastest lap you could possibly do. The grandstands are packed. The cameras are out in full force to see these cars in pure action. And Alice, I think traffic management is going to be key in this Singapore qualifying, especially when we have 20 cars out on track.
Yeah, it seems like in the first 2 practice sessions in particular, we saw quite a few cars getting held up. Max Verstappen held up Carlos Sainz, and then Verstappen got a taste of that when he got held up by, I think it was a Haas and a McLaren potentially. Traffic will be key, and we also have witnessed at the start of this session Max Verstappen leaving a very large gap to the car in front, unsure which car it was in front of him. But already they're trying to leave gaps to make sure that they get that lap time in. And one thing to note is the temperature is 2 degrees cooler. The air temperature is. The track temperature is about 3 to 4 degrees cooler. Of course, when we had FP3, the sun was shining. Out now, they are just under the lights. Some's popped in to go for a sleep. So now it's back to sort of conditions they were experiencing in free practice 2. It's still humid. It's actually 76% humidity, where it's 69% when we did free practice. So humidity has risen. But we saw, didn't we, Harry, that if you make a mistake on your first push lap on these soft tyres, it's so hard to try and then replicate a good enough lap or a good enough first sector. It just takes too much life out of the tyres, especially in this heat on this soft compound. So it's going to be crucial to A, have a clear track position, and to then B, make sure that lap you do is clean and there are no huge mistakes that you then have to abort the lap. As that sound you can hear, we were just riding on board briefly with Lando Norris, who's now fastest in the first sector. The McLaren working really well.
Yeah, looking nice is the McLaren Lando Norris, with new upgrades on that McLaren and a slightly altered livery this weekend as well. A lot more black on that car, interwoven with the papaya orange, as he now makes his way over the Anderson Bridge, through the hairpin and down towards Esplanade Drive to the right-hander of turn 14, and then the kink, followed by the new straight, awaits Lando Norris. First lap times coming in though, everybody on that soft compound tyre, the fastest tyre. That's what we expect them to go qualifying on, and Pirelli actually bringing in the range, their softest range possible when it comes to the hard, medium and the soft compound of tyre. Norris though, with 2 more corners left to go, as the sparks kick up from the rear of that McLaren. He comes around the final left-hander, DRS opens and across the line. Fastest lap time so far, a 1:32.556. Magnussen, Lawson, Hulkenberg, Bottas, the top 5 as it stands. But what has Sergio Perez got as he comes across the line? It's not as fast as Lando Norris, but mere thousandths of a second between them as Perez slots into second. And Verstappen coming through turn 17 with a little bit of difficulty getting the power down in that Red Bull. Comes around the final corner, and it's only 3rd fastest on his first flyer for Max Verstappen.
he was all out of shape, wasn't he? On the exit of 17, got ultra close to the wall. Naturally, you run out there, but that rear was snaking, and we saw some radio messages of him complaining. I expect we're going to hear a few more as Charles Leclerc jumps to the top of the times, but it's very close, 0.07 of a second between him and Norris. Sorry, 0.03 of a second between him and Norris.
Yeah, it is so tight. There's 0.07 between Norris and Perez for second and third. So one thing you can be sure of, around a street circuit in particular, but this weekend from practice, the times are tight as a couple of cool-down laps now ensue, and they might see some more running. Let's just keep you up to date with what's happening in the drivers' and teams' title fight. Max Verstappen leads with 364 points. He cannot win the title this weekend, either in Japan or Qatar. We shall see that. Sergio Perez is second with 219 points. Then comes Fernando Alonso with 170 points, just 6 ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who lies fourth. Carlos Sainz is fifth. Then comes his teammate Charles Leclerc in sixth. George Russell, Lando Norris, Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly round out the top 10 in the driver standings. Over in the Constructors, Red Bull, as we mentioned at the start of the show, could well clinch the Constructors title this weekend, but it will require a 1-2 finish plus the fastest lap bonus point, and for Mercedes to score 1 point or less. They are in the lead though with 583 points. Mercedes lies second. Then comes Ferrari, who are now up into third in front of Aston Martin and McLaren, the top 5. Alpine, Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri, the top 10 and the only 10 in the Constructors' Championship. So that's how we lie coming into qualifying. Of course, no points up for grabs in qualifying. They all come in Grand Prix Sunday, and George Russell right now is heading into the left-hander of turn 10. Then comes the right-hander 11 as you approach the Anderson Bridge, and he's on a quick lap, Alice.
Yeah, he is. He's over a tenth quicker, actually, of the first sector to the current pole sitter, that's Charles Leclerc. So he streams down now the straight, heading down into turn 14, gets it nice and stopped, just under half a tenth up on Leclerc. He needs a nice clean entry now into this final part of the lap. He sweeps into 16. You can see the sparks flying out of the back of the car as he gets close to the wall on the exit, as he heads now towards the end of the lap. So this will certainly propel him way up the order. How far? Is it enough? Yes, it is. Just under half a tenth up on Charles Leclerc, up into P1.
We'll wait and see what his teammate can do as well. Very close with Russell, but losing a few in each sector. But in the end, lost quite a chunk in that final sector for Lewis Hamilton. Just over a tenth and a half back from Russell. It puts him fifth place. It's Russell, Leclerc, Norris, Perez, Hamilton the top 5. We're still waiting lap times though from the likes of Alonso, Tsunoda, Ocon, Gasly and Alex Albon. And that is not the noise of a car, if you're hearing that in the background. Here is Lance Stroll's radio.
Completely impeded me, just right in front of me.
Yeah, copy Lance. Yeah, we saw he impeded you, he parked there.
So that's Lance Stroll on the radio complaining about being impeded, something coming back to the traffic management issues we were referring to there. I think that was a slight glitch on the coverage that you may have heard that we get from the world feed, but clearly rectified now with 10 minutes to go then as it starts to ramp up in Q1, where we eliminate the slowest 5 drivers. They will not carry through to Q2 as we begin to set our grid for Sunday's Grand Prix. We need times from the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, who is just starting his first fly, Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri, Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, the Williams of Alex Albon and the other Alpine of Pierre Gasly. They are all out on track and all currently on fast laps.
It's going to be a scrap all the way up through the field, but certainly for these last 5 places, as you said, Harry, they won't progress through to Q2. And looking back in the final free practice session, Gasly was 15th, Sargent was down in 20th, and there was 4 tenths, just under 4 tenths separating those. So this is key to make sure that you get everything nailed on. You hit your apexes, you hit your braking points, and Esteban Ocon gets a slide out, which will then lose him time heading down the straight into turn 14. He's 3 tenths down at the moment on George Russell. So making sure everything's clean. Traffic can play a part as well, but it's crunch time, isn't it? When you get towards that end of the session.
Top four currently separated by less than a tenth of a second. That is how close the margins here. Esteban Ocon coming through the final two quarters now, having to manage a little bit of traffic, but it stays well clear of him. Onto the main straight for Esteban Ocon. DRS open as he comes across the line. It's a 1:32.9, which puts him 8th fastest, just behind Oscar Piastri, as Logan Sargent was on a fairly decent lap, enough for 11th for the American rookie, about a second off at the moment in that Williams, where they think they are going to struggle this weekend, and his teammate follows him through and is not as quick on these opening runs. Alex Albon, 13th fastest, make that 14th as Yuki Tsunoda hops up into the top 10. That pushes Bottas, Stroll, Zhou down into the bottom 5 as Hulkenberg comes across the line and takes 11th, just in front of his teammate Kevin Magnussen. We are still waiting times from Pierre Gasly. This is the sound of the Frenchman on board that Alpine as he comes through the left-hand kink and down the new 400-metre straight.
And Harry, keep an eye out for Fernando Alonso. His intermediate timing went briefly purple as he was heading through the middle sector. He's just coming towards the end of his lap now in a few seconds' time.
Yeah, he is the other driver that we're still awaiting to see a lap time from. Gasly, though, across the line, gets himself up into 6th with a brilliant final sector from the Frenchman. But what has the old wily fox got? Fernando Alonso, the Spaniard, comes across the line in his Aston Martin and puts it up into 5th spot, a 1:32.5, a 10th off of George Russell as Norris improves his lap time to get even closer to George Russell. This is the sound, though, of Max Verstappen in the Red Bull as he comes across the line and is fastest by 0.08 of a second. The Dutchman goes clear. Liam Lawson in the AlphaTauri gets up into 9th. A quietly impressive run from the Kiwi rookie so far. In the bottom 5, the elimination zone, 16th downwards, is Logan Sargent and Alex Albon, the two Williams. Lance Stroll has just crossed the line and improved, but only to 16th, which is still not enough, as Carlos Sainz comes across the line and pips Verstappen to that top spot. But it's easy to get carried away in Q1. We're looking at the bottom 5, the two Alfa Romeos, the other two cars that occupy it. Can Leclerc pip his teammate Sainz? No, he can't. 3rd fastest.
One thing to notice is Sargent was up in around about 10th place about a minute ago, if that. He's now in the drop zone in 17th place. This track is getting better and better with all these cars having to go round and round and round. Okay, they've had a free practice session. There's one or two support races here, but the track is improving. The track temperature's gone down ever so slightly, so it's still cooling down there on the ground. So I expect we'll see even faster times. We might even see some cars break into the 1:31s towards the end of this session as, very close, Esteban Ocon.
Touch the one on the left side.
Yeah, he certainly did. He did that, I think, in free practice 1. It's a graze of the wall. I think it just getting a bit too close there. I doubt there'll be any damage, but that's not what you want to be doing.
Bit of paint on the tyres, perhaps, for Esteban Ocon. Super close to the wall there for the Frenchman in his Alpine. Okay, so right now, cars, the majority of them, either in the pits or coming into the pits to get ready for a second run at it with 5 minutes on the clock. Incident involving Sargent and Lance Stroll will be investigated after the session. That was the impeding that we heard Lance Stroll complaining about over the radio. But with 5 minutes to go then, it's Sainz, Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell and Norris, the top 5. Perez, Alonso, Hamilton, Gasly, Lawson, the top 10. Piastri, Ocon, Tsunoda, Magnussen and Hulkenberg, the top 15. And in that elimination zone, at risk of not progressing through to Q2, is Lance Stroll's Aston Martin, Logan Sargent and Alex Albon in the Williams, and the two Alfa Romeos of Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guan Yu.
So everyone coming back in now for a fresh set of the soft tyre as Albon waits. The mechanics there with a hand up, waiting, his visor's down, so soon we'll see Albon heading out of the pits. He's got work to do, certainly to jump out of this elimination zone.
And it would just be bad luck for Logan Sargent, wouldn't it, Alice? He's actually ahead of Alex Albon as Williams' teammate by a few hundredths, but it's exactly the sort of performance that he needs with his position in the team under threat for next year. So if he goes and gets a penalty for impeding on the day that he finally beats Alex Albon for the first time, not saying he will necessarily, but at least he's on course for it at the moment, that would be not exactly what he wanted.
I would say it's a harsh penalty. If he gets it from the replay that we saw, there was a few car lengths between the cars. Okay, it can be a distraction, you can lose some downforce, but he didn't exactly fully get in the way. They'll have a look at it, and obviously, hopefully, Logan Sargent's case, he doesn't end up getting a penalty.
The expected cutoff is a 32.5, and we expect 0.6 track improvement, so we're right there.
So 0.6 track improvement. So that's how quickly during this qualifying session the track is improving.
So a 32.5 right now is where Sergio Perez is in 6th. So everybody needs to go again, quite frankly, because the track evolution is so high, hot and humid conditions, incredibly bumpy, traffic management, one of the most physical Grand Prix on the calendar, and the top 15 is covered by a second. So it's tight, and with just over 2.5 minutes left, everybody is out on track as we only await the Oscar Piastri McLaren, who now heads out of the pit lane, and Lance Stroll and Aston Martin expect them to come out imminently, in which they do. Everybody is out on track then and trying to find their own bit of patch to set. Really, they'll get one, maybe two, depending on where they are positioned on the track right now. Sainz has the fastest lap time, a 1:32.3, but this is Q1. It is all about getting into the top 15 and progressing through to Q2 as we set the grid for Sunday's Grand Prix. The bottom 5 will be eliminated. Stroll, Sargent, Albon, Bottas and Zhou currently occupy those positions, but it's anyone's guess as to what's going to happen in the next couple of minutes. I can't wait. The lights shining down here at the Marina Bay circuit. The Singapore Flyer, the Ferris wheel, overlooks the Williams of Logan Sargent as it comes through the final few corners. This is going to be good, Andrew.
Well, so what's interesting, Harry, is that everyone's gone out on a set of new soft tyres, a second set, except for the 2 Mercedes drivers. Now, the reason for that is that you only get 5 sets of tyres for qualifying, and you can't do 2 new tyre runs in each of the 3 sessions if you're going to get into Q3. So Mercedes are obviously thinking, well, a second run on the used tyre is going to be enough, and that'll give us 2 runs on new tyres in both Q2 and Q3. And I think that's a sign that they've got real optimism about where they can qualify this weekend.
Yeah, well, George Russell really showed some good pace in free practice 3 earlier on today. Slightly different conditions, of course, in the daylight. Now we are very much under the lights. It's coming up to 9:20 in the evening local time, and this is the sound of Alex Albon, who will be hoping to try and get through into Q2 after a fantastic run of form in recent races. The last 2 qualifyings have seen him 4th in the Netherlands, 6th in Italy.
Understood.
I didn't hear that, did you? No. That was Carlos Sainz on the radio being told something. He's currently fastest out on track. But this is Albon, who's finding time, but we expect everybody to start finding time with the rate of improvement. Hulkenberg sets a really good first sector, 27.0 for the German. He's currently in 15th as we await for the front runners to start their lap time. Yuki Tsunoda's coming through the middle sector now and finding a little bit of time. A couple of purple mini sectors. In fact, he's fastest of anybody through the middle sector. Albon will cross the line first.
There's so many cars.
And that's Max Verstappen.
Must be on the M25.
Comparing, yes, the Marina Bay, the street circuit, to a rather busier 25. Max Verstappen then struggling with some traffic management. Albon came across the line, got up into 10th spot. This is the sound of Yuki Tsunoda coming around the final corner. 6th gear as he crosses the line, fastest of anybody, and he takes the checkered flag as well. Tsunoda, a 1:31.991, 3.5 tenths clear of Sainz. Kevin Magnussen comes across the line in 2nd. He won't get another go at it now. Such is the rate of track improvement here. The jumps are massive. Hulkenberg gets up into 2nd with a 1:32.1, but it's going to change with every car that comes across the track. Ocon, though, only 5th.
Now, Harry, these times are improving a lot. Is that going to be a problem for Mercedes on their used tyres?
I think it might well be. Where are the Mercedes? Let's have a look. Perez, not as quick as Tsunoda, but up into 2nd. What can Liam Lawson do? That AlphaTauri has looked like it's got some improved performance with upgrades this weekend. Lawson slots in to 4th. This is the sound of Lance Stroll, who's currently down in 20th. The 2 Mercedes haven't had a brilliant first sector, it must be said. Sainz, big crash for Lance Stroll, though. He's into the wall. And that is coming into the final corner. He goes head on into the wall. That brings out Well, it's a yellow flag. Everybody has to slow down as the McLaren just has to get out of the way. Lance Stroll is moving in the car. It's a huge shunt. The complete front left of that car has been taken off. Steam pouring out from it. The rear end is gone as well. A red flag has been called. That will be the end of the session.
So he was all out of shape coming out of 17. I really winced in my seat watching his onboard that we were listening to. He was so close to the wall.
Lance, car is safe. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
He was so close to the wall, giving it absolutely everything, and he ran slightly wide. And we saw nearly George Russell do the same thing in free practice 3. He was giving it everything and just overstepped the mark, and that's a hefty hit into the wall.
Now, I don't want to overstate this necessarily, but I wonder whether that's the first real indication we've had of the pressure that's been mounting on Lance Stroll this season. He's been absolutely annihilated by Fernando Alonso all season, and he was 8/10 slower than him on the first runs in this session. Alonso's been so much faster than him. He's scored so many more points compared to Stroll. Stroll is the reason that they've lost third place in the Constructors' Championship at the last race to Ferrari, because he's underperforming compared to Alonso. And here we are, Alice.
Yeah, so he goes through 16. This is 17 we're listening to. He gets a big slide, nearly clips the wall. You can hear the RPM jump up, comes through, and he just misses. He just actually has some understeer, so he carries maybe a little bit too much speed. Going into 18, he understeers slightly wide. There's a curve just before 19, and he sort of clips that curve, and it's really aggressive. We've seen the wheel fly off across to the other side of the track, and he clips that curve, and that's one of the McLarens that did a great job of avoiding, and that then shoots him wide. It's dusty offline. We talked about it yesterday. He's ran wide just before 19, got on that dust, and then that is just, he's a passenger then. He's had a swapper on, and unfortunately for him, it's thrown him to the right-hand side of the track from a driver's point of view. He's climbing out of the car, so driver is okay, but there is fluid now running across the track from that Aston Martin. The Dr. Cars that is there to pick him up, so that will make it a little bit tricky on the exit of 18, 19, as they're obviously going to have to put some dust on top of that fluid.
Red flag then, and that is the end of the session. We will not get another go at that. So, out at the end of Q1, Valtteri Bottas in 16th in the Alfa Romeo, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren 17th, Logan Sargent in the Williams 18th, Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo 19th, and Lance Stroll will be, if they can get that car rebuilt in time for tomorrow, 20th and last.
And I tell you what, that just goes to show they've got away with it in the end, Aston Martin, but it was quite close to being a massive problem for Fernando Alonso, Stroll's teammate there, because he was one of the last people to go out on his second set of tyres in that session. He hadn't set his second time. The times were all improving one by one. He's ended the session 13th, Alonso, but behind him in the drop zone are Bottas, Piastri, who could easily have got ahead of him on their new tyres before Alonso got to do his time. Had that Stroll crash happened just a little bit later, Alonso could potentially have been eliminated as well through no fault of his own. Yeah,
I think Piastri probably one of the big names to see drop out in Q1. What is a bit of a worry is the rear left wheel of Lance Stroll flying off, not being held onto by the wheel tethers, and that completely flew off. It hit the other side of the pit wall and has come to a rest, but that is a bit of a worry, isn't it, Alice?
Yeah, they're there to obviously make sure that the wheels don't fly off. But that was a hefty impact. That was a big impact. He'll feel that tomorrow. There's not much wiggle room for your head in the cockpit there, but still you feel it, especially if your head hits the headrest. They've got padding on. They're made of padding. There's certain padding that the mechanics have to fit. Different types of headrest padding, but that's still going to hurt. It still hurts if you smack your head against that. And I just hope, for his sake as well, that he let go of the steering wheel. We'll have to see if we get another replay, because obviously that's what happened to Daniel Ricciardo. When he crashed at Zandvoort, he didn't let go of the wheel, and his hand hit the tub. But if you don't let go of the wheel, they say that is the number one rule when you're teaching young kids coming into cars: let go of the wheel. There's no way of saving it, and if you've got the time, let go, because if that rips out of your hands, it can break your hand, break your wrist. Other championships we've seen it happen, so it's quite easy. And it's actually the front left wheel, wasn't it, that that ripped off there. He's still got intact the 2 rear wheels as the tractor now cranes it up. So let's have another little listen. There's that kick of oversteer you can hear through 17. There, just gets that understeer, goes on that curb. You see Andrew, and look, he does let go of the wheel. So thankfully for him, he's done his training course. He lets go of the wheel in that split-second reaction as he heads into the wall.
Now, interesting about this accident as well, one of the things that happens with these Pirelli tyres is if you get a spike of oversteer like that in one corner, you get a spike of temperature in the tyres, and that takes them over the temperature threshold, and that loses grip. So I wonder whether that impacted the loss of control in the very next corner, which is where the crash happened.
Well, it was good to see him get out of that one. Oscar Piastri was the McLaren that came hurtling to the scene first, and it rather put paid to his lap, and he just about managed to get out of the way. But Rosanna, I believe you're down outside Aston Martin.
Yeah, absolutely, Harry. I'm in the paddock at the back of the Aston Martin garage, but as Lance made contact with the wall at end of Q1, Mike Krack, the team principal of Aston Martin, looked incredibly worried. Of course, the car looked very badly damaged, and of course you fear the worst always, and you err on the side of caution. And all the mechanics in the garage as well, hands to their heads, of course worrying about Lance, but Lance we now know is okay, therefore they've got a big rebuild job on their hands as well. Aston Martin telling us, as protocol demands, he will go for assessment at the medical centre, so it will be some time before we hear from Lance Stroll, but it's great to hear him on the radio to his race engineer saying he's okay, and also getting out of the car, then straight into that Aston Martin medical car. So amazing to see these drivers walk away from big crashes like that.
Locked up again in this corner. Balance.
Is the driver alright? That must have been quite a big one.
He confirmed on the radio he was okay.
Are we safe?
Hey, Fab.
Car's very hot.
We'll get to you with fans.
So we've had an update from the FIA while we've been hearing all those radio transmissions, and they're saying that the recovery is likely to take some time. Lots of fluid on the track, as well as barrier checks and repair needed. They'll update it as soon as they can.
Yeah, start of Q2 then will be delayed if you are just joining us here for our coverage of qualifying for the Singapore Grand Prix. It's been a bit of a big hitter for Lance Stroll right at the end of this first part of qualifying, where we eliminate the bottom 5 drivers. He's coming round the final corner to set his final lap in Q1. And a huge shunt into the wall. Driver okay, but that brought out the red flag immediately as the session was coming to a close anyway. So 16th Bottas, then 17th Piastri, 18th Sargent, 19th Zhou, and Stroll 20th of last. He is okay, driver out of the car and seeking medical attention, and that has meant we have a little bit of a delay before we get the next part of qualifying underway. And there's been some more messages coming through from the stewards. The pit lane incident from Q1 involving car number 1, Max Verstappen, will be investigated after the session, and that is for an impeding issue. So not what Verstappen needed, as we're just seeing yet more replays of Lance Stroll's crash, and actually it was McLaren of McLaren of Norris who came across Stroll first and had to do some very quick avoiding work to get out of the way of that loose wheel, and then Piastri came straight away as well, and it's a blind entry, isn't it, to that final corner. And when you have a car in a million pieces facing the wrong way, you've really got to make a quick decision.
Yeah, you have. It is certainly a blind corner. Actually, in free practice last year, I ended up having a little bit of a spin there. Luckily, I avoided the barriers, unlike Stroll. And it's hard as a driver. You can't see it. That's how blind it is. You cannot see of when to pull back out. And Lando did a good job there. A, to avoid the incident, but B, because he's going flat out through there, he's the rear wing, the rear of the car is sitting down, so he's using the maximum downforce because he's flat out. And when you have an incident like that, if you lift or brake going around that corner, that can then really unsettle the car and you could end up having a spin. So he did a great job of calming the car down here. And let's have a look at the incident between Max Verstappen, it's just between Max investigators. So this is what I was on about at the start of the session. He stopped in the pit lane. There's a green light.
Looks like, yeah.
Yeah, so there he's trying to get a gap, but I don't believe you're allowed to stop like that in the pit lane and wait for the rest of the cars
he's blocking the fast
to go.
lane,
Yeah,
isn't he?
he's blocking the fast lane. So
And it's the Mercedes who, and then another car as well, that are forced to pay the consequence of that. So we'll see what the stewards say. They are investigating that one. That red flag, I mean, it was going to be a close call for Hamilton, Alonso, perhaps Norris as well, who were all trying to squeeze in one more flyer. So the red flag helping them to get through into a Q2 for sure. Very impressive right at the end from Yuki Tsunoda, actually, in that AlphaTauri. Set a 1:31.991, a 10th clear of Sergio Perez, who did get a second quick lap in as well, and managed to hold that until the red flag came. I think Sainz had just gone fastest in the middle sector before the red flag had come out in the Ferrari. But these upgrades for AlphaTauri seem to be going the right direction for them and Tsunoda for sure.
Yeah, they're working pretty well, aren't they, for them? I feel sorry, actually, for Piastri and Sargent, because he'd set not a bad first sector compared to those sort of around him. I don't know whether he would have popped up into the top 15, but he was ahead of his teammate before Albon went a little bit quicker. So he's one of those that's lost out there as well, and he probably feels, the world's against me. That's the last thing I needed. But unfortunately, that's the way it goes, and that's one risk, Harry, that if you try to sit in the pit lane and you try and sit and wait and you go, do you know what, I'm going to wait for the traffic to go, I'm going to wait for the track to improve, so when I'm the last to cross the line, the last car to go, the track's going to be the best because everyone's cleared it for me, as that's the sound of some very happy fans seeing themselves on the TV. You run that risk of catching a red flag, and that's what some of those that have left that gap have come up against. Saying that, Stroll was quite far. He was one of the first cars, wasn't he?
What did you say to me in between practice and qualifying? Oh, no one's really hit the
wall yet. No one's hit the wall yet. Commentators curse.
I said somebody would in qualifying, didn't I? I got the wrong person, but...
Well, who did you think it was going to be?
I went to Sargent, didn't I?
Oh, yeah.
I think if you'd asked me to go for second bid, I would have gone for Stroll.
Oh, well, as we have seen and said, Lance Stroll with a big crash at the end of Q1, and really that car completely totaled. He's out of the car and fine and seeking the attention, but obviously a lot of damage done and fluid leaking out onto the track. Also a bit of barrier damage as well sustained in that, coming through the final corner onto the start-finish straight. So while the track marshals and race direction deal with that and make sure it gets repaired and all up to spec, we are having a slight delay before we get Q2 underway, which is the battle to get into the top 10, and the next 5 will be eliminated. So 11th down to 15th will be eliminated, and that is where they will start the Grand Prix from. So 2 AlphaTauris, 2 Hasses through. They'll be pleased with that to get ahead of their Alfa Romeo rivals, who are both victims of that red flag and out in Q1. A sole Williams, a sole Aston Martin, a sole McLaren make it through, and the 2 Ferraris, the 2 Mercedes and the 2 Red Bulls. And this Red Bull struggle seems to be carrying through. I've been hesitant all weekend long, as we've discussed, because they clearly have had issues, but they normally sort them out. Verstappen getting antsy on the radio, even if it's not necessarily to do with the car, but other drivers just being in his area. All is not quite at peace down at Red Bull.
Yeah, it's not a rosy Red Bull that we usually see, is it? He was complaining about locking up. I'm guessing we haven't seen any replays, but I'm presuming it's a front lockup into one of the corners, and it seems like it's repeated, so he's having more and more issues. It was rear locking before on both cars, and the upshifts and downshifts on Verstappen's. So they've just not got it sort of nailed. I mean, he's before everyone else improved. He obviously was down in 9th place at the end of that session, but didn't set a lap time. He was improving. He would have jumped up for sure, but yeah, he's not quite happy, is he? Even though he did not a bad job in free practice 3, and he wasn't too far, sorry, in the first part of Q1, he wasn't too far off the pace. That's not good enough for Max, is it? He wants to be top of the timesheets and clear of the field.
Absolutely right. He doesn't settle for anything less these days, but still Q2 to get underway, and hopefully it won't be too long. We haven't had any updates yet on that, so when we do, we will keep you up to date as and when we know. But Verstappen, well, with that record now, 10 consecutive race wins, looking for an 11th and looking for a first Singapore Grand Prix win, a first Singapore Grand Prix pole in his career. It's not quite as straightforward right now, with the two Ferraris showing some excellent pace, particularly over one lap, and the Mercedes coming alive, particularly George Russell in the final practice session earlier in the day, proving to be a thorn in the side of Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Perez as well, struggling with similar issues to Verstappen in what will be his 250th GP this weekend for the Mexican racer, looking to, well, do back-to-back Singapore Grand Prix wins for the Mexican. Of course, his last 5 wins have been at street tracks. He is a bit of a street track specialist, and he needs a bit of a confidence boost, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's been, I think that second Red Bull's seat's always
cursed,
a difficult.
It's cursed, surely.
It's always a difficult one. You just look at Albon, you know, he's, for example, he was in that second seat, wasn't it, after doing a great job for AlphaTauri. Then he jumped over to the Red Bull seat, struggled, you know. And he's moved out of that, had a year out and come back, and he's really excelling in that Williams car, probably putting it higher up the grid at some races than it should be. So it's always going there. I think wow, this is going to be a tough seat, this second seat. But you know, he took the job. He would have known it was not going to be easy. He's had a pretty tough season, I would say, because that Red Bull has certainly been the best car on the grid. I would like to think that coming after the summer break, he was going to come back, you know, all refreshed and mind reset and ready to go. Didn't really seem to be the case. He had not a bad result last time out at Monza, but yeah, he needs to start chucking in some good results and challenging Max, because at the end of the day, even if Christian Horner has said, yeah, no, we'll have him next year, I wouldn't take that. You just never know with Red Bull. We've seen that already with Nick de Vries being turfed out for Daniel Ricciardo at the sister team. So it's a tough one. He needs to start pulling it out. He's second in Q1. People weren't improving. So we'll just have to wait and see. But like you said, he's a particular fan of street tracks. And I think last year he did a really good job. He led all the way through in tricky conditions. So we know he's got the talent. But you can have the talent, but if you haven't quite got the mindset and you're there psychologically, we see from whatever the sport that it can play a huge impact into the results.
Well, the cooling fans are in action as all the drivers sit and wait patiently in their cockpits and receive the fans, the dry ice, the cool ice being blown in their face as the lights illuminate the packed grandstands that surround this Marina Bay Street Circuit. The inaugural F1 night race, the first ever in Singapore, and one that is a fan and a driver favourite, even with this slightly altered layout where we cut out 4 corners. The Marina Bay area due to some work going on down there, redevelopment taking place near the track in that downtown area of Singapore. Expected to have that back, but a lot of the drivers are quite enjoying this new layout where we don't now go back under the grandstands and then head towards that quick right-left chicane. Now it's just a new 400-metre long straight that brings you to that chicane. But as ever, surrounded by the Singapore skyline, the Singapore Flyer, the Ferris wheel, which overlooks the entire circuit, 165 metres, 541 feet tall. It really is a magnificent feat of engineering, along with the Marina Bay Sands Resort Hotel, the huge building that looks like it has a ship built on top. That is where the infinity pool lies as well, and so over 2,500 hotel rooms in that hotel, with a mall, a museum, theatres, casino, all overlooking it. And the fans, even though there's no track action right now, happy as Larry, smiles all around, waving their flags, and it's a real mixture actually of supporters in the crowd, from Russell, from I think there's a Racing Point flag in there as well. We'll call that Aston Martin, shall we? But still no action underway yet as we await Q2 to get underway. This is because we had a big crash right at the end of Q1 as the checkered flag came out for Lance Stroll and his Aston Martin, losing control of his car and finding the wall rather hard and damaging near totaling that Aston Martin. Driver okay and out of the car, seeking the appropriate medical attention, but that brought out the red flag immediately after a couple of cars were able to improve. The likes of Tsunoda, the two Hasses, Lawson and Perez managed to set improvements, and Carlos Sainz was looking very fast indeed. One of them who wasn't was Logan Sargent, and he's speaking to Rosanna.
Thanks, Harry. Yes, Logan, what a tricky session. The track was ramping up. How did you keep on top of everything?
Yeah, it was a tricky session for sure. Track evolving lap after lap, making each lap count more and more. And I felt really good. I knew that last lap it was going to be everything. And everything was going as smoothly and as good as I could have hoped for. And just entering turn 10, had a load of missed downshifts, and it cost me a huge amount of time. So disappointing for it to happen on the one lap it matters, but what can you do?
You've got a lot of laps tomorrow. Of course, it's so tricky to overtake here. How do you rate your chances of picking off a few drivers tomorrow evening?
It's going to be a long evening. I think it's definitely a race of attrition, so that hopefully plays into our favor. We didn't have the greatest long runs yesterday. We struggled with overheating for sure. I think the car is in a better place now than it was yesterday, so hopefully that can help us. But I expect a long, tough one.
You look a little tired after that Q1 alone.
No, just more disappointed. The fact I felt like I was doing everything right, and it still doesn't go right. But it is what it is.
It is what it is. Well, good luck tomorrow, Logan.
Thank you.
Good to hear from Logan there, who in the early part of Q1 was looking like the better of the two Williamses, but just not quite going his way for Sargent. And you have to feel for him a little bit, don't you? Bad luck, wrong place, wrong time. But there is an incident being investigated between turn 16 and 19, which is as you approach the final two corners, and we're seeing a replay of it now. Two Ferraris, a Mercedes, a Red Bull, an Aston Martin, a McLaren, clogging up the road, essentially, all trying to find themselves a gap, while there are others coming through, either finishing fast laps or starting fast laps. That is a recipe for disaster, really.
That was... that's what Max was talking about, all the cars. The M25 traffic, Singapore traffic. Lots of them are being investigated. It's flashed up that it's being investigated.
So what's interesting about that is that there was a new edition of the Race Directors event notes published this morning, and one section of the notes was completely deleted, and that was to do with any lap during and after the end of the qualifying session, including in and out laps, may be deemed to be going unnecessarily slowly if it exceeds the maximum time from the second safety car line to the first safety car line. Now that's a time that's defined during the event, which is used as a kind of marker of when a driver is going too slowly in a Formula One car. That's been completely deleted, but there is the previous clause in the event notes that preceded it still exists, which says that in order to ensure that cars are not driven unnecessarily slowly on in laps during and after the end of qualifying or during reconnaissance laps, drivers must stay below the maximum time set by the FIA between the safety car lines shown on the pit lane map. So that's a slightly different time delta that they've been given, but there's still a time delta that you've got to stay by. So they're going to have it's going to be a tricky one to adjudicate that, because there's so many drivers involved. Are they going to penalise them all? They're all going to say, well, we've not done anything dangerous, we've stayed off the racing line, what's the problem? Yeah, and of course it may be that they haven't impeded this maximum time, but it does look rather, because they were going so slowly, almost at a standstill, some of them, that as if they're certainly going to be in danger of breaching that time. So it's going to be a tricky one, as well as the threat of penalising with a grid penalty the World Championship leader for impeding in the pit lane. So stewards are going to have a busy time after the session.
Yeah, they are busy and are going to be more busy. All it takes is for one car to slightly jink out onto the racing line, and then you've got an aeroplane crash on your hands. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but they will be looking at that in depth.
So, just to go back to the point I was making about Lance Stroll, it's true that his dad owns the team, and his job is not under threat, and he will stay in that car up till the moment where Lance Stroll decides he doesn't want to be in the car anymore, or Lawrence decides he doesn't want his
persuades
son
him that he doesn't want to be in the car
anymore. Exactly. Now, Lawrence, the father, billionaire who bought the team, yes, he's using it to promote his Aston Martin road car brand, but the only reason he has that team is for Lance to become world champion. And lots of chat in the paddock this year. Obviously, everyone thinks that was a delusional ambition anyway, because he's not good enough to be world champion. But having Fernando Alonso as his teammate has just underlined that in big, thick, multiple black lines this season, because it's shown the gulf between Stroll and an absolute world-class talent. And the problem for Lawrence that he's going to have to work out, and Lance, is, as we've discussed before, even if Alonso goes away at the end of his current contract, which runs out next year, because he's getting a bit old and they don't want to keep him or whatever, anyone you want to put in that car, if you want to be a successful Formula 1 team, is going to beat Lance Stroll. And Alonso's just demonstrated it. It doesn't matter whether it's Leclerc or Verstappen or Hamilton or Russell or anyone, Norris, anyone of that calibre or close to that calibre is going to do the same, similar sort of thing to Stroll. Now, I happen to know about something that I can't tell you about, but I can tell you
tell us.
I know that Lawrence is very sensitive to the suggestion that Alonso is destroying his son at the moment. And I found that out at the last race in Monza. And I just wonder, having a first run where Alonso's 8/10 quicker than him on a track where he knows Alonso's amazing, and the pressure's been mounting all season. These guys are not impervious to pressure, even when they're the sons of billionaires. Of course, Lance Stroll will deny it, I'm sure, even if someone asked him, which they may well not now. But I wonder how much all of that was weighing on his mind as he made that mistake coming out of the final chicane and headed in to that last corner and just went a bit too far over the limit.
I mean,
but will Stroll turn around and say, hang on, I was impeded by Sargent? That's what he might turn around and say.
Well, they'll always find an excuse, won't they?
Yeah, I mean,
but the numbers don't lie. He's trailing qualifying 13-2 in Alonso's favour, race 13-1 in Alonso's favour. And Stroll is the reason, categorically, that Aston Martin are not second in the Constructors' Championship right now.
Yes. And there is that as well. As it's just many things, isn't it? It's a tough one. Go on, Benny's got some facts.
Yeah, so it's not just the ratio, it's the pace. So Alonso's nearly 0.4 of a second quicker than him on average. And in terms of the championship, Alonso's in third with 170 points. Where's Lance Stroll? There he is, ninth with 47. So yeah, he's not even got a third of Alonso's points.
Well, the gap between Ocon and Alonso was definitely less than 4/10, wasn't it? I can't remember exactly, but I want to say around a couple of tenths. I'm sure Andrew will figure that out at the moment. But it was definitely, the gap was less, and we could see it visibly on track that the results were nowhere near as, the disparity was nowhere near as what we've got now.
0.169 is your answer on average.
Not far off.
Yeah, so it was 9.7 to Alonso last year. So Ocon was a lot closer. Okay. And this is I've just turned myself off there. Sorry about that. I'm so busy pressing this button on and off. This is a guy, Fernando Alonso, who, you know, I don't think anybody even thinks that qualifying is his strongest suit. You know, everyone rates him incredibly highly in Formula One, but if you were to pick like the best drivers in the field over one lap, I don't think anyone would say Alonso was their number one. I don't think even Alonso would say he was the number one. In fact, I know he wouldn't for a fact. I've heard him say it. But he is, as an overall package, unbelievable, as only two or three other drivers potentially are. And I suspect that Lawrence Stroll, that is, didn't really know what he was letting himself in for. I know that he was warned. I've said this before on the radio this season. I know that Martin Whitmarsh, the Aston Martin CEO, sat Lawrence Stroll down before they signed Alonso and warned him about what he was letting him in for. He said Whitmarsh wanted to sign Alonso, and he said to Stroll, he is everything that you've heard. He can be difficult, and he will potentially cause some problems in the team, but he will lift our performance up on the track to a level like you've never seen before. But he will also put Lance under a pressure he's never had before. Are you ready for that? And apparently Lawrence Stroll said yes. he's ready for that. And his belief, apparently, I'm told, is that, if Lance is going to prove himself in Formula 1, he's got to do it against the best. And obviously, the flip side of it as well, I believe, is that Lawrence doesn't mind so much if Lance is going to be beaten by an all-star legend like Alonso. He does mind if he's beaten by a Felipe Massa or a Nico Hülkenberg or whatever. So better to have Alonso in the team, he thinks, on that basis. But none of that means that the pressure wasn't building on him over the previous 14 races that we've had, and that first lap, it doesn't mean that it wasn't involved.
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't for Stroll. So as we await news, and there is news from the Racing Troll, 9:53 local time is when we will get Q2 up and running and back underway. So in a few minutes' time then we will get that back up and running. So a little bit of a wait there, and if you were just tuning in as to why we're having such a long discussion about Lance Stroll and the pressure he's facing, is because he is the reason for the delay. A big crash for him at the end of that. He's fine out of the car, but that delayed us. But Q2 will be getting going in a couple of moments' time. So let's check in with Rosanna, who's down in the paddock.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, I am in the paddock, and I'm just watching some of the Alfa Romeo team tucking into some ice creams. We've had enough time for them to find an ice cream, cool down a touch, and then they'll be getting back to work, I'm sure, for Q2. But people waiting patiently, fans trying to get a little photo of some of the drivers that have come to the media pen. We've seen Valtteri Bottas, Oscar Piastri, Logan Sargent, Zhou Guanyu, all through the media pen. And a lot of people just trying to get a glimpse of a driver while we wait for the second part of qualifying to get underway. It's still incredibly hot and humid, I have to say. It's not feeling like it's getting any cooler, even if the figures may say so.
Yeah, well, 29.4 degrees air temperature, 34.2 track temperature. It's the humidity that gets you. 79% humidity. So Singapore is a tough one for everybody, but especially tough for those who sit inside the cockpits of the Formula One cars. The sound you can hear is a fan going into Charles Leclerc's Ferrari helmet as he desperately tries to cool down before he heads back out into Q2. And we'll get this back underway. 15 cars will be back on the track, and we will eliminate the bottom 5.
Do you know, I'm not sure I've ever seen a humidity level as high as 79%, even in Singapore, when it's not been raining, of course. I don't know what Rosanna's feeling down there in the pit lane at the moment, but
probably a bit warm.
Yeah, that is. It's normally hot and humid in Singapore, and it's part of why everyone, bizarrely, it's part of the character of the event, and everybody enjoys it, even though you sweat a lot. But 79% is super high. It's just gone down to 78. But gosh,
I don't think that'll be much comfort to Rosanna.
I'm glad I'm in an air-conditioned commentary box. Is all I can say.
They'll have the ice bath ready for Rosanna, I'm sure, just like the drivers. Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc in their Ferraris peel out of the garages. Max Verstappen as well has made his way towards the end of the pit lane as they will await for the red light to turn green in about 20 seconds time. Once we get Q2 back underway, 15 cars out on track, we'll eliminate the bottom 5. So if you don't make it through to the top 10, you're not going through to Q3. 11th down to 15th are the next victims of this 15-minute qualifying session as the light goes green at the end of the pit lane, and the 2 Red Bulls are first off as they peel away. Perez in front of Verstappen, who trundles out of the pit lane just to allow a little bit of a gap between himself and his teammate. Didn't stop and wait quite as long as he did during Q1, for which he is being investigated for impeding those behind him. But I'm sure the Haas of it's Kevin Magnussen behind him would have preferred him to get on with it just a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I'm surprised Max didn't do that. That's the safer way to do it. If you want to get a gap, just trundle at a slower pace going down the pit lane. Obviously, he was stopped when he was queuing. That Haas is right up underneath, isn't he, of Max Verstappen's car. But yeah, just trundle ever so slowly down the pit lane. And actually, Max has got a nice enough gap to his teammate Sergio Perez, as the Mercedes are still sitting in the garage. We've still got the Alpha Tauri sitting in there as well, and Albon and the Alpines are sitting in there as well, as everyone else has taken to the track.
Well, so what are we expecting then with track evolution for this session? Are we expecting the same rate, or now that because we've had a bit of a gap, a lack of track action, it's going to take a little bit longer to start getting faster? How does that work?
I would say we'll see a rate, but definitely the track will improve. The temperature is decreasing ever so slightly, but we haven't got as many cars going around, so it won't be as great. We've obviously got the dust and the spillage down at the final corner, which would probably clear fairly quickly after a few laps. So it will increase. We'll see them deeper into the 131s, that is 100% sure. But we won't see that big jump that we saw earlier on, as Lando Norris sort of stretches his hand and fingers going down the straight here. He's been sat for a while, feels like he needs a little bit of a stretch.
Yep, everybody out there at the moment on a set of new soft tyres as well, and it'll be Max Verstappen who is screaming around the last two corners and starts his first flyer. DRS open as he trundles down to turn one. The rear wing slot shuts underneath the braking, and he makes his way through the twisty and tight S that makes up turns 2 and 3, then into the left-hander towards the off-cambered right-hander, which then brings you down the first of the, well, straights that have a kink in them, Raffles Boulevard, as he gets up into 8th gear through the right-hander of 6, but it's taken flat out in these Formula 1 cars, down through the gears into the left-hander, easy to run out onto the curb there and lose control of your cars. We've seen through free practice, Max Verstappen holds it well before he finds the right-hander of turn 8, then the left-hander of turn 9, which brings you down towards turn 10. The old Singapore sling, now it's just a left-hand corner. You move slightly to the inside before coming to the right part of the track and sling it into the left-hander. Next up, over the Anderson Bridge for Max Verstappen. Under the lights, he's got a bit of traffic in front of him, into the braking zone for the hairpin as he now comes down towards turn 14. Espinard gets good drive out of that corner, past the Alpine into the next braking zone of 14, Alice, which takes you to this new part of the track, the 400-metre straight that's been added in.
Yeah, usually you used to stamp on the brakes and turn right there into turn 15, but they carry on through 16 now and through 17, where we see so many drivers get so close to the wall, and so does Max Verstappen. Now we're coming through the final two corners of the track. Let's have a look at the track, and I have to say the Masters have done a very good job there of cleaning up the track. Max, of course, goes to P1, but I'm expecting Kevin Magnussen actually to jump him, which he does by over 1/10 of a second. And having a look at the sectors, Harry, Carlos Sainz, he's the first one so far to get into the 26 seconds in sector 1, so he's flying around. He's actually fastest in the middle sector as well. As the sound is Lando Norris, who pops up, and there we go, into the 131s to the top of the times, a 131.9.
Here comes Carlos Sainz, then sparks fly round the final corner, and it is fastest by 0.05 of a second, 131.893, nearly 0.06 of a second for Sainz. What has his teammate got? Charles Leclerc, not as quick on his first lap in Q2, comes across the line in third. So it's Sainz, Norris, Leclerc, the top three. This is the sound of Fernando Alonso on his first flyer, fastest of anybody in the middle sector, fastest of anybody in Q2 by another 0.05 of a second for Fernando Alonso. Mighty lap from the Spaniard.
Yeah, so we're already seeing the times of what Tsunoda was doing, as that is the sound of Sergio Perez pretending he's driving a skateboard or riding a skateboard as he goes across that exit curve at turn 7, where we saw the Ferraris, didn't we, in free practice 3 get a bit out of shape. So that would have definitely lost Sergio time, as loads of dust is underneath the car rubbing on that curve there. But we're now at the times that we saw Yuki Tsunoda doing, into those 131.9, 131.8. So the track hasn't slowed down at all. It will get quicker. I would have thought we would have seen some drivers do probably a 131.5, I expect, if the session had continued in Q1, as we are riding on board now with Tsunoda as he comes through. Sounds like he may have backed off ever so slightly there. Yeah, so he doesn't continue round. He set 2 personal bests in sector 1 and sector 2, but has decided, you know what, I'm going to bleed round into the pits. He's sitting 13th place, and he's been called into the weighbridge, so The drivers have to pay close attention when coming into the pits, that they get randomly called into weigh just to make sure that they're running on weight throughout the session. So he's been called in there. That does lose you some time. It is a random check as George Russell now heads across the line and heads down into turn 1 to start his first flying lap in this session.
Yeah, the team Mercedes wait a little bit before coming out, but they are now both out there. We are awaiting lap times from Russell and Hamilton and Tsunoda, who, as Alice just said, peeled into the pits right at the end of his first fly. So we'll wait and see what the Japanese racer's got. His teammate is currently 11th fastest, Liam Lawson. But this is the sound of George Russell, who was finished in the top 6 in the last 4 out of 5 Grand Prix, starting to refine some form in this Mercedes, and he's a 10th and a half up in the first sector compared to Fernando Alonso, who's currently fastest, but it is tight right now. Less than a second splits the top 11 drivers, but Russell going well, and we'll wait and see what Hamilton's got. In fact, he's matched Alonso like for like in the first sector, but Russell is quicker than him, but it's not by much at all. It's neck and neck, but it's in Russell's favour right now.
It is, and literally like for like. Lewis Hamilton's first sector is the exact same time as Fernando Alonso. George Russell purple in that first sector, and he's half a second up already on Fernando Alonso. So he needs to keep that pace up now throughout the lap. These Mercedes are looking extremely handy.
Just bear in mind, by the way, that the Ferraris were on used tyres when they set their first times. Alonso was on new.
Thank you very much, Andrew Benson. Always worth bearing in mind that. But let's see what Russell can do as he comes across the line. The rear looking a little bit twitchy coming through the final corner. But he goes fastest by just under a tenth, a 1:31.743. Russell ahead of Alonso, but Lewis Hamilton has also been looking quick as well. He was a couple of tenths down on his teammate Russell in the middle sector. Can he claw it back in the final sector for Lewis Hamilton? It's only enough for 5th fastest, almost 3 tenths off of his teammate's time. Hamilton down in 5th, but remember this is Q2, so the main focus is to get into the top 10, because the bottom 5 from these 15 cars are eliminated in just over 6.5 minutes time, and right now that bottom 5 looks like this. It is Perez, Hulkenberg, Lawson, Albon and Tsunoda.
What the f*** doing, man? Honestly.
And on cue, that was Yuki Tsunoda, and was that why he bailed on that lap he was on? Because it was decent in the first sector, but then he got held up by a Red Bull, ironically enough.
Yeah, sounds like he was. George Russell actually lost a little bit of time in those final 2 sectors, which is why the gap there was not as big at the top. But Lewis Hamilton's struggling, isn't he, compared to his teammate?
I was going to say, he was quicker in the first session, but ever since then, Russell's had a couple of attempts on Hamilton. He doesn't look like he's been able to make it up yet. Obviously, you can never rule him out, but it's been consistent now all the way through 2 practice sessions and now the 1.5 qualifying sessions that Russell's been the quicker Mercedes driver by a decent chunk.
Yeah, the man who has Lewis Hamilton, who has appeared at every Singapore Grand Prix ever held, 4-time winner around these streets. Currently it's his teammate though, who seems to have the edge for the time being, but it is so close as well. In fact, just a tenth and just under 2 tenths covers the top 3, but then everybody within the top 13 is within a second.
Also, Harry, worth pointing out that we just had one run in qualifying. The Ferraris were on used tyres, but Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez and the Red Bulls are 10th and 11th fastest. How often have we seen that this year?
Not very often.
I just almost don't believe it. you just think, oh, they're saving it right till Q3. Then it will be P1, P2, and everything we picked up will all be for nothing. But it does seem that Red Bull are very much struggling, and also they've got to deal with the stewards afterwards, because Verstappen is already going to be under investigation for impeding, and he's going to be under investigation again now. Firstly it was for the pit lane incident, and now the stewards have said it's noted that incident between himself and what we heard Yuki Tsunoda complaining about earlier on. So Verstappen then will have to pay a visit to the stewards come the end of this qualifying. He
was also in that gaggle of cars that are all under investigation at the end of Q1. I noticed that he was there along with the Ferraris and a couple of McLarens, and there was another driver there as well. So Max he's going to have a few trips up. He's going to be getting his steps in today, going back and forth to the steward's office. Could we see 2 Red Bulls out in Q2?
Yeah, well, they're about to go for their second runs then now as they start to peel out of the pit lane. 4 minutes on the clock to set the fastest lap time you can to progress through to the top 10 and Q3 as we set the grid for Sunday's Singapore Grand Prix here at the Marina Bay Street Circuit. Under the lights, 4.9 kilometres, just over 3 miles, 19 turns, 12 to the left and 7 to the right with a slightly rejigged format as we've cut out 4 corridors around the Marina Bay area where we used to go back under the grandstands. That's been gone because of some works going on down there in the downtown area. That's been replaced now by a 400-metre long straight.
Be careful. Okay, go. Yes, thank God you shouted. If not, I would have crashed.
And that's in response, that's Carlos Sainz in response to him getting very close to the Red Bull of, was it Max Verstappen? It was
Yes.
one of the Red Bulls, wasn't it, coming out of the pit lane? And the pit lane, for some reason, we've seen a lot of issues there so far this weekend, struggling to get out as the 2 Mercedes now make their way out of their garages.
Yeah, well, your vision's limited, so you have to trust everyone around you, as the incident involving Verstappen and Tsunoda is going to be investigated after the session. But it's hard to see. It's not like you can look over your shoulder, look left, look right. You've got the hands device there. You've got the head race reds blocking your vision as well. So that's why Sainz said, yeah, lucky you said that, because it was close. He would have made contact with Verstappen, which, yeah, gosh, wouldn't have been nice to then have heard Verstappen's radio made his day go from bad to worse. But just want to touch back on the Russell and Hamilton. At the moment, their qualifying head-to-head is 7-7. So they're equal at the moment on qualifying. But George has out-qualified Lewis the past 2 Grand Prix, obviously Zandvoort and Monza.
Yeah, Russell is riding a bit of a wave right now with confidence in that car. Verstappen has officially picked up the trifecta now. All 3 incidents, all for impeding, and all will be now officially investigated after this race, after that last one that was initially noted between himself and Tsunoda has now been upgraded to being officially investigated after this qualifying session is gone. But that will be far from his brain right now, as he will get one final flyer to get himself into Q3. Verstappen currently in 10th with Perez in 11th. There is work to do, but at a track where the evolution is high and the competitive order is very, very close. But with a Red Bull that has been unhappy all weekend long and continues to be unhappy in the hands of Max Verstappen as he tries to turn in for turn 3 and has to have a couple of goes on the steering wheel with it, Alice.
Yeah, there's no bite there in the front end of his Red Bull, but just noticing, actually, Harry, he's skipped a lot. He's overtaken a lot of cars to give himself the best chance to try and be out of the traffic free, but so far it's not worked for him because he's not even set a personal best sector, and the car is squirming on the exit there of turn 8 as he goes through turn 9, ever so close to the wall.
Verstappen could be in trouble here, you know. Hulkenberg's gone faster in the first sector, in the Haas. So Verstappen needs to have brilliant second and final sectors as he comes across the Anderson Bridge. Yellow flag out in sector 1 as well. That won't affect Max Verstappen. He's made his way through now as he comes through the Anderson Bridge. But it's his teammate, Sergio Perez, who has spun and is the reason for the yellow flag. He's able to get it back going, but Perez could be looking and will be looking at a Q2 elimination. Can his teammate skate through? Ocon improves up into 7th. Gasly's not finding time in the middle sector. Yuki Tsunoda will be looking to get his first proper lap time. What a lap from Nico Hulkenberg up into 6th as Verstappen now comes flying through the final 2 corners. Sparks fly for the Dutchman as he crosses the line. He does improve, but it's still 10th fastest. He's at real danger here of being knocked out in Q1. Max Verstappen, the reigning champion, the man who has already got one hand on this year's title, at risk of not even making it through into the top 10. Gasly can't pip him though. What can Tsunoda do? Liam Lawson, his teammate, will come across the line before him, and Lawson knocks Verstappen out. 7,000ths of a second clear. Lawson gets into the top 10, but Yuki Tsunoda is going fast as well. Let's see what the Japanese racer can do. The Ferrari crosses the line, Sainz finds time, he's fastest. The Ferrari's comfortably through. Leclerc, though, will need to find some time as well. Tsunoda doesn't finish his lap time, he won't be able to get through. He comes back into the pits. Max Verstappen out in Q2 will start 11th.
I Saw that, but that was shocking. Absolute shocking experience.
2 Red Bulls out in Q2. Max Verstappen 11th, Sergio Perez in 13th, and it was Liam Lawson, the rookie, brought in by Red Bull to replace Daniel Ricciardo in that AlphaTauri team in Lawson's 3rd qualifying. Starts in the top 10. How did he get there? He picked Max Verstappen out by 0.007 of a second.
He certainly did. What a lap from Lawson. But, Harry, just looking at my sectors here, Yuki Tsunoda, a very good first sector, a very good second sector, and then the last sector, he boxed and he came into the pits. So either he made a mistake or somewhere along the line, as me and Benny just quickly discussed with our mics off there, maybe Red Bull said, no, we'll bring him in.
And then...
Well, we can probably guess what he's just said there. He's not particularly happy, as Max is not even waiting for the car to be wheeled back into the garage. It's gone up on the stands. He is out of it straight away. The crowd are giving a round of applause. Are they giving a round of applause because they've seen Max walk down the pit lane, or see him walk down the pit lane out of this session? But he's fuming. Max Verstappen, he's you could see it in his face. He's so angry.
And this isn't just about qualifying 11th. This is qualifying 11th on a track where it's almost impossible to come back through the field. Max Verstappen qualified 7th, I think it was, in Singapore last year. Everyone thought he'd come through to win the race, just as he had at a number of races before that year, when the car was just as dominant in the second half of the season as it's been this season. He said he wasn't going to be able to, and he wasn't able to, and now he's 11th. Unless something really, really remarkable happens tomorrow, Max Verstappen's winning run will stop this weekend.
History being made this year by Max Verstappen, by Formula One, and the books continue to write themselves. The first time neither Red Bull will reach Q3 for the first time since 2018. This is the sound of Sergio Perez and why he didn't get a lap time in. He took too much curb, Alice, through turn 2 and into 3. The S section gets caught out and round he goes.
Yeah, so what he's done is he's run slightly wide, had to pull the car, similar to what we saw happen to Oscar, similar what we saw happen to Liam Lawson. But actually listening to that sound there, he locked the rears as he went into brake to try and save it. You heard the rears lock up, and Max does something similar, but then he turns in, he gets that hit of oversteer, puts him slightly offline. He then has to wait. He's got some understeer. I mean, that Red Bull does, I've never thought I'd say it this season, but that Red Bull looks horrible to drive.
Out then at the end of Q2, Verstappen, yes, Max Verstappen will start 11th in front of Pierre Gasly in 12th, Sergio Perez in 13th, Alex Albon in 14th, and Yuki Tsunoda, who came in right at the very end, will start 15th. But looking at his best sector times compared to his teammate Liam Lawson, who made it into the top 10, Tsunoda would have, if he'd carried on, pipped his teammate Lawson and gotten himself up into the top 10. Why they call Tsunoda in right at the end? We don't know. Then
I'd like to see that.
He may have made a mistake. We have not seen anything on the world feed that we are shown in the commentary box. It could well be an innocent thing. It might well not be. We'll wait and see. So Q3 will start at 9:16 local time. 10:16 local time, I should say. So in about a few minutes' time then, as we get underway through into that time. We're just having a little look from race control. There is a incident involving Leclerc for an incident in turn 3, failing to slow under yellow flags. And that, usually, Alice, is a pretty slam dunk.
That is a slam dunk. You've got to show that you've at least slowed down in some shape or form. Probably means that he's improved. We'll have to have a dive into looking at the sectors here.
It depends. Sometimes you can improve on the overall sector, and that gets flagged as noted. But actually, in the actual bit where the accident was, you can prove to yourself, prove to the stewards that you did slow down. If that's the case, sometimes the drivers get away with it. But you're right, if they can't prove that, he's going to get a penalty too. So the stewards, it's going to be a long evening, I think, in Singapore.
We're going to be here a while before we do the post-qualifying podcast, aren't we? Which you should be able to check out for the Checker Flag on BBC Sounds and wherever you get your podcasts from later on this evening, today, wherever you are in the world. But so we will get Q3 underway. And who skated through to Q3? Well, two Hasses got into Q3. Magnussen and Hulkenberg. Bearing in mind they haven't brought any upgrades this weekend, both making it through, along with Ocon in the Alpine, Liam Lawson in the AlphaTauri gets his first top 10 appearance in his three races that he's three qualifyings that he's had. The two Mercedes, the Norris McLaren, the Alonso Aston Martin, and the two Ferraris, Sainz and Leclerc. And once again, it's Carlos Sainz who actually finished that session fastest, and looks like it's his pole position to lose.
Yeah, it does. We predicted it earlier. Well, he just copied me, basically, Harry. He was sitting on the fence.
I refute any kind of allegations. Russell
is up there as well, but he's been on top form all weekend, as Carlos Sainz, and to add to that, his teammate now under investigation. That'll be after the session. They won't change the results so far, but it is certainly his to lose. But just going back on the Hasses, they were either one of them was either ninth in free practice 2, free practice 3, or lower. So that's probably a big surprise for them to have both cars up there in the final qualifying session, as now the cars are queuing at the end of the pit lane. We've got a McLaren of Lando Norris down there, Charles Leclerc's down there, we've got Fernando Alonso, and I think at the front of that queue is Carlos Sainz.
It is, and just on the Haas thing, it was actually Magnussen faster than Hulkenberg, and more often than not this season, it's Hulkenberg who has the qualifying advantage in that car, 11-3 in Hulkenberg's favour, and then in the races it's a little bit closer, still Hulkenberg 8-6 in favour of the German. So let's see, perhaps under the lights, the Haas cars coming alive a little bit. They do plan on bringing a whole new spec of car design for the Austin Grand Prix in 2 races' time. But right now, going well. Leclerc, no further investigation, failing to slow under yellow flags. So they've obviously found some hard, solid evidence there to refute that.
Yeah, that'll be what I was talking about, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so right then, session underway then. Q3 is go, and the clock is already down to 11 minutes as the Carlos Sainz Ferrari, Alonso's Aston Martin, the two Hasses, the other Ferrari, Leclerc, and the AlphaTauri have already made their way out, and the two Mercedes are about to join them.
Now, one thing to bear in mind, the pressure on every driver at the front with any shot of pole position has just gone up exponentially, because Max Verstappen is out of the running. So Mercedes, Aston Martin, Ferrari, Lando Norris are all thinking there's a race to win here, but to win it they've got to qualify as high as they possibly can, ideally the front row, because overtaking is so difficult around Singapore. So watch this.
Well, wasn't it around Monaco or before that where Fernando Alonso in his Aston Martin did pinpoint Singapore as the next realistic opportunity where we could get a race win?
Yeah. He's amazing round.
Don't want to jinx it.
Oh, well done, Harry.
Sorry. Look, 10 minutes to go as all the cars peel out for their outlaps. Everybody then out on track. Everybody on that red rubber, the soft compounder tyre, the fastest. That Pirelli bring the qualifying tyre as we get up to grips with this track. Pick for pole then. Come on, let's do it. Let's reevaluate. Pole, Alice.
I think
you sticking with Sainz, or could the pressure get to him?
Do you know what? Shall I just throw it out there and go someone completely different? Shall I go Russell? So I feel like you're going to pick Sainz.
Well, you know what? I was thinking Russell.
Okay.
But you know, you go Russell.
How cute.
You go Russell. I'll go Sainz, and Andrew Benson will go. He doesn't want to answer.
I really don't want to answer.
Go on.
I really don't want to answer.
Go on, Fernando.
It's between Sainz, Russell, Leclerc and Alonso.
Okay, that's 4 people. Only one person can get pole.
Leclerc.
Okay.
Different.
Well, Sainz has had the edge for the majority of the sessions, but as Andrew quite rightly points out, with Verstappen and Perez out of the running, Pole is for the taking, and as a consequence, the race win is very much up in the air for Sunday's Grand Prix as Carlos Sainz begins his first flyer in Q3. Let's see what the Spaniard has got. He's looked the fastest of them all. He'll be looking to take back-to-back pole positions as he gets mightily close to the wall at the exit of Turn 5, down Raffles Boulevard, through Turn 6, the slight right-hand kink, but it's taken flat out in these Formula One machines. It's a DRS zone as well. The rear wing flap slams shut at the end of the straight in the braking zone, manages the exit curve on 7 well. He's already through into the left-hander of Turn 9 as he approaches the short straight to the left-hander of Turn 10, and this is the sound on board the Spaniard.
He's not fastest in the first sector. Lando Norris, he's not in any of our predictions, is he? He's ever so slightly quicker. There's nothing between them as they're charging through the lap as onto the brakes does Carlos Sainz go. Exit of Turn 13, hammer down, DRS wide open as he springs down the straight. Lando Norris fastest in the middle sector as well. Wait, can we change our predictions? Can we rewind?
No, they're locked in. Can't do anything about it, sorry. Sainz is looking quick though still. He's carrying that pace. Alonso comes across the line. A 1:32.168, the opening gambit from the Spaniard. What can Lando Norris do? It's fastest across the line. A 1:31.56 clear. This is Sainz across the line though, wow. And he goes over 3.5 tenths clear. A 1:31.170 for Carlos Sainz. What can his teammate do? Charles Leclerc was mighty in the first sector. Can he match his teammate? No, he cannot. Charles Leclerc in second, 2.5 tenths down from his teammate. We look next to George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, the two Mercedes, and once again it's Russell who has the edge over Hamilton.
They're on used tyres. Everyone's on used tyres except the Ferraris in this run.
So that explains. I was just looking at the sectors here, and Sainz, he's gone. He's in a different league in that middle sector. He's 3 tenths quicker than Russell in the middle sector. Only pops up into P4. So that's a big disappointment. George would be really disappointed with that.
Hamilton comes across the line and it's only 5th, so the two Mercedes 4th and 5th then, 6 to 7 tenths off for Russell and Hamilton. So after those opening laps, it's Sainz, Leclerc, Norris, Russell and Hamilton the top 5. Alonso, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Ocon and Lawson the top 10 in this Q3 shootout, where only 10 are taking part as we set the grid as to who will take pole position for the Singapore Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz looking for back-to-back poles. Charles Leclerc looking to once again claim a pole position around the Singapore track. Lando Norris in an upgraded McLaren has been looking mighty quick as well. George Russell too has come alive in the last couple of practice sessions, but you can never rule out Lewis Hamilton or Fernando Alonso either, whilst the two Hasses I think are just quite happy to be there.
Yeah, I think so, but that middle sector from Carlos Sainz it is something else. Really, really electric. He's just over a tenth quicker than his teammate in that middle sector. He's 3 tenths quicker than Norris. You could say Russell, Hamilton. So he's done a real good job. Is on the new set of tyres, so that certainly will give him grip through those 90-degree corners, and then you've got the squirt of power going on to that DRS straight out of 13, so that's probably will explain, but even so, he's over a tenth quicker than his teammate in that sector.
He certainly is. You hear the sounds of the tyre guns removing the nuts from the wheels and being replaced and taken off as the fans head straight for the drivers, and the cooling fans, I mean, head straight for the drivers in the cockpit to cool them down. With 5 minutes on the clock then, expect a fairly quick turnaround, and it will be, as we've seen in Q2, a one-lap shootout right at the end.
Yeah, it will. So Norris, a really good job there. He has a good first sector. So does Russell. But then that middle sector, they lose a little bit. And then certainly for Russell, he's about 3 tenths down in the last sector from Sainz, and he loses about 2 tenths to Norris. So the Mercedes, they're actually struggling a little bit in that final sector. So they haven't got any time to go too deep into the data, as already the tyre warmers come off and out peel the pits go the two Ferraris. Sainz first, Leclerc second.
All right then, here we go. the final part of qualifying here, which has been a little bit truncated due to a red flag that came out right at the end of Q1 for the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll, who on his final push lap found the wall in his Aston Martin and found the wall rather hard. The car completely totaled. Stroll able to get out of the car though and walk away and seek help, so driver okay, but that brought out the red flag. Lots of fluid on track around that final corner and onto the main straight. Barrier damage as well, and so that had to be fixed, and that led to a little bit of a gap before we got Q2 underway, in which we did. And the big story from Q2, the two Red Bulls both out, Verstappen and Perez. Perez spinning his chances away and Verstappen just lacking the pace. But what that has meant is we are set up for a grandstand end to qualifying. The Ferraris seem to have the advantage right now. Carlos Sainz in particular has been fast since the get-go. Charles Leclerc has been right there with him though, but on this occasion Sainz seems to have the edge. Lando Norris in that McLaren, that's the sound you can hear right now as he shifts up through the gears, has upgrades to that McLaren and is finding pace with them. But the two Mercedes are fast as well. George Russell having the edge over Lewis Hamilton. There is one remaining Aston Martin, it's Fernando Alonso, and you can never rule him out. Also joining them are the two Hasses of Magnussen and Hulkenberg, who are pleasantly surprised to find themselves with no upgrades this weekend in the top 10. And the sole Alpine of Esteban Ocon, and a brilliant showing from the rookie Liam Lawson. In only his third qualifying will get a top 10 start regardless, and he got it by knocking out Max Verstappen. So I don't want to be Liam Lawson walking into a debrief come the end of this, or do you? I think he'd be happy either way.
I think he'd be pretty happy making his first Q3. One thing to note is the two Mercedes, they left it quite a long time after everybody else to go out of the pit. So looking at the tracker, they are now sort of coming into sector 2 now, where you've got the likes of Sainz, Leclerc, Alonso, who are pretty much near the end of the lap. So they've left it a long time. That's good in some ways because they'll be on a better piece of track. The track will have been cleaned up even more for the cars in front. But that huge but is you do then risk, if there is a yellow flag, if there is a red flag in front of you, and you've got to abort your lap.
The lights are well and truly shining here in the Marina Bay circuit as the traffic makes its way across the circuit up high. The Singapore Flyer, the Ferris wheel, overlooks the start-finish straight, as long as the Marina Bay Sands Resort, the Skyline Hotel with the infinity pool shaped like a boat at the top, watches on as well. 1 minute remaining of Q3 as all the drivers begin their first flying laps. And right now it seems like it is Carlos Sainz's pole position to lose. Everybody out there on fresh rubber, the red soft compound of tyre. Sainz comes across sector 1 first. A 26.7 for the Spaniard. Lando Norris can't quite match it, but it is close between those two. Norris right up there. What can Leclerc do? He's coming through the first sector now. What's the split going to be? Sainz beats them both, but can they hold it through the next two sectors?
Yeah, as he feeds it through, gets so close to the wall there on the exit of turn 12. Sparks flies, he goes down the straight. Currently we have Carlos Sainz. He's on for pole, looking at the sectors, closely followed by Charles as well, but he's not done a personal best in the middle sector as Carlos Sainz.
No, he's lost a bit of time there, so that leaves him vulnerable to Norris and Leclerc. Norris very, very close, but still a little bit off Sainz's time. Can Leclerc do anything? Alonso comes across the line in fifth. Leclerc, personal best, overall best in the middle sector. The advantage swings back to the Monegasque. Carlos Sainz will cross the line first and takes provisional pole with a 1:30.984. Lando Norris will be next to cross the line in his McLaren. The DRS Open, it's good enough for second for the British racer, a 1:31.2. But what can Charles Leclerc do? Can he deny his teammate as he comes across the line? No, he cannot. Leclerc second. 7/800ths of a second down on Carlos Sainz, but it's not over yet for Sainz. The Ferrari team celebrate their provisional 1-2, but can they be denied? George Russell in that Mercedes is trying his best to steal away back-to-back pole positions for Carlos Sainz, and this is the sound of the Briton round the final corner and across the line, and he just misses out. George Russell will have to settle for second on the grid. Lewis Hamilton crosses the line in 5th, but it will be back-to-back pole positions for Carlos Sainz, who will start the Singapore Grand Prix from the front of the grid. George Russell will join him on row 1, Charles Leclerc in 3rd, Norris in 4th, Lewis Hamilton in 5th. A magnificent qualifying from Kevin Magnussen in the Haas in 6th, who out-qualifies Fernando Alonso in 7th. Ocon crosses the line in the Alpine to go 8th. Nico Hülkenberg is 9th in the Haas, and Liam Lawson will start from 10th.
We have it. We have it. And now, and 2 in a row. Tell me we have it. Yes. Was super close, yeah. But it's for us.
Wow, we've got a race on our hands tomorrow, but George Russell going into turn 16, he was up, but he just had a slight bit of oversteer, Harry, as he turned in mid-corner there at 16. He had to wait on the throttle to then get on the throttle to feather through 17.
Yeah.
He sounded a bit out of breath there, did Leclerc?
He did. So could pole position, could it have been there for George? As I said, just having that twitch of oversteer has possibly cost him pole position. But, wow, we have a race on our hands tomorrow, but what a lap from Carlos Sainz.
That pole could have gone one of 3 ways in the end, and I think Carlos Sainz earned and deserved that pole position as he pulls up into Parc Fermé, removes his headrest and steering wheel, balances it on the nose cone of that Ferrari. The cheers erupt. It's a Ferrari 1-3 as Leclerc joins him and clambers out of their Ferrari, celebrating with the team and together. Carlos Sainz, pole position in Monza, pole position in Singapore. 5th career pole.
Charles Leclerc's looking pretty disappointed, I would say there. He congratulated his teammate, but just from his body language, not that I'm an expert at reading body language, but showing signs there that he's fairly disappointed. And George now...
I think George will be disappointed as well.
I think he will, because it was there. He was up. And that oversteer has cost him a little bit. It's under a 10th of a second. 700ths he was off as the crowd's cheering for the drivers walking down the pit lane as George Russell climbs out of his car. All drivers will have to go and get weighed, but big smile on the Spaniard's face, and that is Carlos Sainz.
The top 9 covered by less than a second, just over 8/10 of a second, down to Nico Hülkenberg. Lawson was 1.2 off in the end, but my oh my, that as a top 10, fantastic.
So looking like there that George Russell's brakes, he was rushing his mechanics to come and get to the brakes there. Looked like they were getting a little bit hot on that front left as Carlos Sainz takes
downs the bottle of water.
Yeah, very big gulp of water there. It's pretty hot as the 2 Ferrari drivers now are going to have a little bit of a debrief together.
Well, yeah, they're not smiling and hugging, but I think that was fair and square fight, wasn't it, right at the very end? And Sainz coming out on top, ahead of Russell, Leclerc. Lando Norris will be pleased with his 4th place on the grid, with new upgrades being brought there. Lewis Hamilton, though, I think will be disappointed with that 5th. We'll be able to hear from Carlos Sainz, our pole sitter, being questioned by Danica Patrick.
Charles, great job, top 3, but obviously the times are so close. Explain just how hard it is to execute here where you're just threading the needle with walls all around.
Oh, it's extremely difficult, as everywhere, but here probably even more so with the tire temps and the overheating throughout the lap. It's always a balance between the first and the last sector.
Everything was super close. Mercedes was really strong today too. So it was an interesting qualifying. Unfortunately, I missed just a little bit to gain few positions. But again, Carlos did a great job. 1:30 for the team tomorrow, and let's see what we can do.
What's the team morale? You guys have really come on. Obviously, it's been a challenging year. Just talk about that.
Yeah, the physical challenge tomorrow is going to be something for sure. It's extremely warm, extremely humid, but until now we've had a very good performance. Honestly, we did not expect to be so competitive on a track like this, so this is a good sign for the future, but let's see what we can do tomorrow.
You guys have struggled on the race long runs. Do you think that that's going to be the case again tomorrow, and why do you think it might be different?
I don't know. I think we looked quite strong all weekend, so hopefully we won't see that tomorrow.
All right, good luck.
Thank you.
It's hot out there, huh?
It's hot out there for sure. Got a sweat on.
And you guys spent a lot of time sitting in the car. So just talk about the chaos of the session, a red flag, all the traffic everywhere. It's a bit of a challenge here in Singapore. Just help us explain what that was like.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenging session. And when you're sat in that car, it's like you're sat in the sauna, just sweating it out. But you got to keep your composure, stay cool. But no, really, really happy with this weekend as a whole. Felt really confident in the car. The team did a great job with the strategy. We're on an offset strategy compared to everybody else, so we've got an extra set of medium tyres tomorrow, which nobody around us has. So to get to Q3 and be on the front row with a strategic advantage tomorrow is an exciting place to be.
Well, traditionally only one stop, so you obviously have to have the right tires for the right situation, and then you have to pass. There's a new passing zone potentially. Do you feel like that's going to help you guys tomorrow? Because starting on the pole 8 out of 13 times has proved to be the winner.
Yeah, I mean, the track's different this year. The tyre degradation on Friday looked pretty bad, so I think it's going to be very close between a 1 and a 2 stop. You know, with our mediums, we can put Ferrari in a difficult position and try and force them into an error and get the upper hand. So that's what we're looking for.
All right, good luck.
Thank you so much.
Well done. Sitting on the pole, you guys, you're on a run. Just talk about how that feels. You guys have had a really trying year, and here you are sitting on the pole again. Got to feel really good.
Yeah, again, a bit like in Monza, really hitting the ground running from FP1 and feeling very confident all through the sessions and putting it together in Q3. Just focusing, not doing any mistakes in that lap, keeping it clean. That around here in Singapore normally it pays off, and was a bit of a messy session for everyone, but we kept the focus, put a good lap in the end, and another pole position.
You've been happy with the balance since you said the first lap on track. Where is that coming from? What is it that you guys have done that has helped you be so happy from the start that's allowed you to sit here on the pole again?
Yeah, I think it's the story a bit of our year. You know, we have a very good car in certain tracks and in certain conditions, like one lap. And these sort of short apexes, quick changes of direction, our car seems to be very good this weekend. Again, a bit like in Monza, we know our weakness is always the race pace, and it's where we always pay the price. But I think the team has been doing a great job over the last couple of weekends to understand the package, understand the car, and I think we're definitely making a bit of progress, keeping in mind that this circuit has always suited Ferrari quite well.
How is the race pace?
Race pace, a bit of a question mark. It's not like in Friday you can learn much. But Mercedes normally is a bit quicker than us come race day. They have a bit of a different strategy with the tires that we will have to keep an eye on. But if I focus in my own race, put together a good first stint and a good stint on hards, then I think we can still target the win. You
have the opportunity here to dethrone Red Bull, and they've been on the top of the podium for so long now. How would that feel? Yeah, that would feel amazing, and that's the target. I mean, try to get the win tomorrow. I'm going to give it everything like I gave it in Monza, and hopefully tomorrow is enough. All right, good luck. Thank you.
Carlos Sainz, back-to-back pole positions for the Spaniard, talking to Danica Patrick. He will start the Singapore Grand Prix from pole ahead of George Russell and Charles Leclerc. But the big news from qualifying, both Red Bulls not starting in the top 10, and Max Verstappen, the best he could do was 11th on the grid. Rosanna's talking to him.
Max, bad luck. Was it car? Was it circuit? What was it down to this weekend?
Well, I mean, it's a combination of the two. Our car on this circuit, we couldn't get it in the right window. And every session we have been chasing it. I think FP3 was actually quite a lot better. But then, we tried a few more things in qualifying, and that definitely tipped it over the edge again, where then it becomes super sensitive, and then you can't push, and it's just really, really tough to drive, as you could see. Like I explained before, massive bottoming, sliding around a lot, so really, really tricky.
It's P11 now. Do you think once you've been to the stewards for those infringements that you'll be starting from P11
well,
come the race?
It might be also worse, but I mean, at this stage, that also doesn't really matter anymore. It's pretty much a weekend to forget.
Well, hopefully there'll be more weekends to remember. I'm sure
we've had already many to remember.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know that that's part of it as well, but of course it's still disappointing. But I'm also quite realistic. I'm not going to sit here and think that tomorrow we will be on the podium. That's just impossible. So it doesn't really matter if you start P11, P15 or last.
Good luck.
Well, could this unprecedented run of wins, this record-breaking run of wins for Max Verstappen be about to come to an end? He will start from 11th place, but also he is under investigation for 3 separate impeding incidents as well by race control. So we wait and see what that brings. Thank you very much for listening with us. Thanks to Rosanna Tennant down in the pit lane, the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson, Alice Powell, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. It is Sainz who will start on pole. Russell, Leclerc, Norris, Hamilton, the top 5. Magnussen, Alonso, Ocon, Hülkenberg and Lawson, the top 10. Then Verstappen, Gasly, Perez, Albon, Tsunoda, the top 15. Bottas, Piastri, Sargent, Zhou and Lance Stroll will be your grid for tomorrow's Grand Prix. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. We'll have full post-qualifying chat on the Checkered Flag podcast, which you can check out later today on BBC Sounds and wherever you get your podcasts. And do join us for the race over on 5 Sports Extra. We'll be on air from 12:45 in the UK with lights out from 1 o'clock. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.